Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to request the parents who might still be out in the lobby to please make your way into the men's musalla. The youth session will be starting at this time in the gymnasium, and the preteen Quran night is happening upstairs, inshallah. So all the youth should be going to the gymnasium, the preteens upstairs, and all the parents should be coming here. The sisters, mothers, you can either be downstairs behind the glass doors, or you can be upstairs. It is your choice, inshallah. And if you would like to ask any questions, I'm going to give you a number where you can text your questions. So at any point during the talk, if you have a question for myself or for Brother Usman Mughni here, you can text your questions to this number. It'll come to my cell phone and I will read out the question and we'll try to answer it at the end, inshallah. So the number is 972-379-7624. Once again, the number is 972-379-7624. And with that, we'll get started. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Allahumma اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا شقيا ولا محروما برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Brothers and sisters, I would like to kick off this weekend's workshop or this weekend's conference with a few points that I wanted to mention. First of all, I would like to congratulate the youth committee for putting this event together. And I would also like to congratulate them for having a parallel session for parents while the youth are having their own session. These parallel sessions are important. I'll tell you why they are important. Because a lot of parents feel that it is their children who need to learn about Islam. So what they do is they come to the masjid, they drop their children at the masjid, and then they go and do whatever they feel is important that they need to take care of. But the fact of the matter is, brothers and sisters, that there is a lot that we parents also need to learn. As parents, we have a great privilege from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the ayat and all the ahadith that talk about the importance of respecting parents and being good to parents and so on are there. And we are very keen on reminding our children about those obligations and duties that they have towards us. But at the same time, parenthood is a great responsibility from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us in the Sunnah about that responsibility. In one hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. Every single one of you is a shepherd, and every single one of you will be asked about your flock. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. O you who believe, protect yourselves, guard and shield yourselves and your family members from a fire whose fuel is stones and humans. So it is our responsibility as parents to tend to the needs of our children. And we will be asked about that on the Day of Judgment. It is our responsibility to ensure the proper upbringing of our children. It is our responsibility to help them protect their faith, to find conviction in their faith, to grow up to be responsible, beautiful, honest human beings and Muslims. It is our responsibility to create an environment around our children which nurtures them and encourages them to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to become Muslims in the fullest sense of that word. That's all our responsibility. And none of us were born knowing how to be parents. There is no manual that our parents gave to us on our wedding night that taught us this is the best way to parent our children. In fact, there is no book out there that has been written for you, customized for you, how to raise your child. And so there is a lot that we are learning on the job, as they say. And we have a lot of challenges and a lot of concerns and a lot of questions that it helps to get answers from people who are experts in the field and who are experienced in the field. Parenting is not easy to begin with, but the matter is made even more difficult if we understand the circumstances in which our children are growing up. There is always a generation gap between the parents and the children. But the gap seems to be widening with time. The current generation of youth that are growing up, not just in the United States, but all throughout the world, are increasingly unique from the youth of before. The challenges that they're facing have never been faced before. And so there are articles upon articles and studies upon studies on the millennial generation and how unique they are in both positive ways and negative ways. And so because the challenges are so many and so unique, it requires even more effort from our part to bridge that generational gap that always exists between parents and children. And therefore, there is even more need for us to come to sessions like this, where we, parents, can also receive some advice on how to navigate through these challenging times and raise children that are successful in this life and in the hereafter. So I congratulate all of you for coming to this session, for understanding the need to learn. There's always more to learn. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. If you don't know something, ask those who know. Ask those who are experts. And we should never be too arrogant to ask. We should never feel like, oh, I know everything, I don't need to ask anybody else. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, there are two kinds of people that will never learn. One of them is the person who is too shy to ask questions. And the other one is the one who is too arrogant to ask questions. The one who thinks that they know everything. So the reason why we're doing these parallel sessions, brothers and sisters, is for this reason. Because as parents, we also need help and guidance and tips in trying to understand our children, in trying to understand what they're going through, in trying to understand the things that are important to them, why it's important to them, even though they may not be important to us, in trying to understand how to communicate with our children So it is important to have these parallel sessions for that reason. And it's also important to give some privacy to our children to be able to ask honest questions in our absence and get advice in privacy away from us. Part of the techniques that the Prophet ﷺ used in giving advice, in teaching people, in correcting people's mistakes, was to advise them privately. One of the mistakes that we make when we are correcting our children's mistakes is that we shame them publicly, that we advise them in front of their siblings, in front of the other parent, in front of their friends. We shame them, and that prevents them from accepting what we're telling them. So there is merit in giving advice privately. So if there are things that the youth need to be told, they will be more recipient to that advice when they are away from us. So this is part of the wisdom why we have separated the parents from the youth and decided to hold these parallel sessions. So I thank the organizers for doing that, and I thank you for coming and being part of these sessions, inshallah, that are starting tonight and will continue all day tomorrow. And now with tonight's topic, inshallah, is stressful expectations. And Brother Usman, who's sitting to my left, he's going to be talking on this topic. I'm going to hand the microphone over to him, but before I do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about him. I'm going to read his bio that's in front of me. For those of you who may not know him, actually Brother Usman is not a stranger to our community. He has been here before, mashallah, and we expect him to come again and again. He is a local, alhamdulillah, of DFW. He's part of the DFW community. He has been doing great things around the DFW community. Many masajid have benefited from his presence and his expertise, and we are one of those masajid. So, but just in case for some of you who may not know him, Brother Usman Mughni is a marriage and family therapist and master's level mental health clinician. He holds an MS in marriage and family therapy from Northern Illinois University and a BS in psychology from the University of Maryland, along with a degree in diagnostic medical imaging. He's worked as a therapist in Alexian Brothers Behavioral Health Hospital in the Center of Addiction Medicine. And he's the founder of Peaceful You Incorporated. And there's a website with that URL as well that you can go to and find out more about him, peacefulyou.org, I believe. Brother Usman has experience providing counseling to individuals, couples, and families at Northern Illinois University's Family Therapy Clinic, along with experience working with individuals, couples, and families struggling with chemical dependency and mental health diagnosis, and running psychoeducational group therapy at Centegra Specialty Hospital's partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient programs. Brother Usman enjoys working with couples to help bring tranquility back into their marriages and providing premarital counseling to couples who hope to have a successful marriage at a time when divorce seems to be on the rise. He also works with individuals and their families struggling with addiction, along with other mental and emotional struggles that they may be having. So without further ado, Brother Usman.
Jazakallah khair for that very lengthy introduction. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for your kind words, and Jazakallah khair for the community inviting me. I usually give most of my talks limited to Valley Ranch, so I don't venture out in this part of the woods that much, but alhamdulillah. So as Sheikh was mentioning, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am the founder of and primary therapist at a clinic in Dallas called Peaceful You Counseling. What a marriage and family therapist does is the name itself can be kind of confusing. We do a lot more than just marriage counseling. So actually, the bulk of my work is anxiety and depression, and then I specialize in addiction. A lot of cases that I see are either, marijuana, alcohol, a lot of pornography addiction, things like this. So that's kind of where a lot of my expertise lies: depression, anxiety, and addiction. Marriage and family therapists, we look at the family as a whole. So if there's one person suffering, right, just like we know in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the whole ummah is like a body, right? When one part of that body is suffering, the whole rest of the body stays up in fever and pain and agony. And so for those of you which have had family members which were going through either depression, anxiety, or even some type of sickness, you know the effect that it had on the entire family. We know those of us which maybe have lost loved ones, the hole that leaves in the entire family structure. So you can't separate the individual from the family, right? Parenting and parental relationships, out of all of the different relationships, very anxiety provoking. And I want to make sure that message is made clear, because usually in lectures we talk about, well, talk softly to your children, do this, don't worry, put tawakkul on Allah. Being a parent, it's one of the most anxiety-provoking things when your child is sick. I remember several years ago when I was working in radiology. I was in my early 20s at the time, and there was a mother who had the kid was probably 2-3 years old, very sick. They weren't sure what the prognosis was. The woman didn't eat for 2 days. She didn't speak any English. I speak Urdu, so the staff told me, "Hey, can you speak to this woman? She's gonna end up in the ER because she's worried about her son, but she hasn't ate or drank anything for 2 days." So I asked her. I said, "Sister, what's wrong?" And she just, with whatever little energy she had left, she said, "I swear, I'm not going to eat or drink anything until I know my child's going to be okay." And I remember going home that day and just hugging my mom and saying, "SubhanAllah, that's what you went through. That's the love you have for us." So it's a very unique relationship. So when therapists like myself do give advice and say, "Hey, try this, try that," we're not discounting the sacrifice, the struggles, the love that parents have for their children. So I want to make that very clear before we start, pointing fingers and saying you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. So when we talk about expectations, and you guys can just yell it out, or raise your hand, what type of expectations do we have for our kids? And I think since this conference is more geared towards teenagers, this is Gen Z now, Gen I. Anybody 1995 and was born 1995 and later is considered Generation I or Generation Z. It's a very unique generation. But just somebody raise your hand and yell it. What are some of the expectations that we have, the hopes that we have for our children? I want for my child to doctor. Yeah, I know. I've already told him, he's 6. I've told him, listen, subhanAllah, you have choices. Lots of choices. You can be a cardiologist. You can be a dermatologist. You have, okay. What else? Good human being. Right? What else? Be a good Muslim. Be a good Muslim. Right? So these are hopes and expectations that we have for our children. Now, I'm not saying this is a general rule, right? Because each family is different. But as far as academic success, for the majority of cases that I've seen, in America, kids, they eventually make it. If they don't graduate in their early 20s, they'll graduate in their early 30s. They'll figure something out. They'll reach that academic success. But the problem is that process, us parents, we make it so anxiety-provoking, yelling and putting them down and so on. That relationship, that's lost. And one of the questions that I actually pose to people is that, what if? And you can speak to parents which have actually lost their children. SubhanAllah, out of all of the cases that I work with, bereavement or a parent losing a child, most difficult. I, make dua for all of my patients, Muslim and non-Muslim, but the ones which, subhanAllah, I have to take a step away from and just cry in sujood are the ones which have lost their children. May Allah give us all patience and ease the pain of those which have lost loved ones. But I ask people, what would you do if you knew you had 3, 4, 5 years left with your child? Would that change your expectations for them? We don't know what the future holds. We don't know how much longer Allah Azza wa Jal will allow our children to live with us, to be in our lives. Doesn't that change the perspective a little bit? Right? And so I would like us, once in a while, and I don't want you to be anxiety-ridden all the time, like my son might die or my child might die anytime, but have this idea that while I'm worried about med school and SAT scores and finishing hifz and doing all of this, what have I done as far as my relationship with my child? What have I done to secure that bond that the Prophet ﷺ created with children around him? Right? And I'll tell you, speaking from my personal experience, right? And I don't. So this is all adults. So like, hopefully, I don't tell this to kids because then they make that as an excuse not to study. So alhamdulillah, I have 3 degrees. I graduated with honors, full scholarship. Alhamdulillah, all of that. I had a 2.0 in high school. That's a failing GPA. And my father, may Allah always protect him, he had expectations for us. But he also was patient and loving. And even when he would sit down with my brother and I, right, we got into a lot of trouble. But he would talk about stuff beyond just our grades. And my father's 70 now. He's my best friend. He's my best friend now. I'm 36, he's 70. For years we've been best friends, right? I didn't reach his academic expectations at that time. But he didn't let that be a reason to cut off that love, to cut off that compassion. So, yes, once in a while he would say, Usman, you got to study, you got to pay attention to this, you got to pay attention to that. But he would also ask me, hey, how's gymnastics going? How's track going? Oh, you went to play basketball. How's this friend? Did you see this movie? He kept that open relationship as well. And I'm always indebted to my father for that. May Allah preserve, protect, and always send mercy on our parents. Amen. So, I would like to just start off with that. When we talk about priorities, honestly, especially those of us with teenagers, 4, 5, 6 years, they're off to college, they get married. That's the way this dunya is. And then you start to realize, subhanAllah, maybe I should have smiled at my child more. Maybe I should have, as the Prophet ﷺ advised the man who complained of a hard heart to run his hands over the head of the orphan. Maybe I should have hugged my child more. Maybe I should have shown him that love. Let's not be those which regret not showing that love. Right? So that is actually the foundation. When we talk about motivating our children to do good, that's the foundation. So how do we set that foundation? So let's talk about a few practical tips. Right? First thing, very simple, dinner time, right? Everybody's very busy. I advise parents to try their best to at least have one time where they sit down for dinner. But now here's the rule. If you're going to sit down for dinner as a family, the rule is don't talk about grades. Don't talk about what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done, and so on. You can use any other time for that. This is a time to laugh, to connect with your child, to learn more about them, right? The second thing is, when you're at dinner, at least for an hour, a detox from this, right? So there's an article that I posted on our clinic's website recently about just the dangers of screen time, just overall, how it's affecting all sorts of facets of our health, physical, mental, spiritual, right? So lead by example. Don't tell your kids while you're on the phone 24/7 to put away. The whole family, like one unique suggestion that I try and have people do is maybe like have a little box, right? From 8 to 9 p.m., everybody puts all of their devices in that box, right? It's gone, right? Unless you are an emergency room physician, you don't need it for an hour. Nothing's going to happen, inshallah, right? I do a lot of hiking. I'm actually headed to Boulder tomorrow, so that's not for work. And I remember I went out with a few friends, and we went to a place called Yosemite National Park. Beautiful place. And there was no cell phone reception. And I remember I was like, alhamdulillah, no cell phone reception, right? Nobody can reach me. I can't reach anyone. I can, detox myself. And I remember my friends, they're so connected. They're like, there's a cafe about 50 minutes out of town which has Wi-Fi. Let's go. I'm like, are you kidding me? Just for that, So having that time where you detox, right? The other thing, Sheikh, you mentioned this idea of a generational gap, right? Generational gap from a psychology perspective, generational gap is the idea that, we're from a certain time, our kids are from a different time, they think differently, we think differently. It's a social construct. You know what I mean by that? It means that we create that gap. You make an effort to find out about your child's, likes, dislikes, whatever TV shows they might be watching. Pay attention to some of those things, right? You can close that gap. And then finally, subhanAllah, I was talking about having a really bad GPA. My father, he's a computer programmer, but he was also a math teacher, and math was my weakest subject. But Abu, instead of focusing on Usman, you're horrible at math, you failed high school math, you failed chemistry, I was very strong in English. So Abu always used to start off the conversation, any advice with, Usman made is like the best at English. He's so strong. And I was getting a C in English, but at the same time, while I was in high school, I was writing my friend's college papers, just for the heck of it. I don't know. And so Abu always reminded me of that, and that stuck with me. Right? So then I would look at my GPA, I would look at my grades and say, okay, F here, C minus here, D minus here. Oh, what was that thing Abu always says about me? Usman's really strong in English. And that stuck with me. And so alhamdulillah, when I was ready to actually take my academics seriously, that kept ringing in my head. Right? Abu highlighted for me what my God-given talent was. So this is the last practical advice. So one is dinner time, talking about things outside of grades and responsibilities. Two is detox from any type of technology. Three is have conversations where you're closing that generational gap. And fourth is find out what is your child's God-given talent. You guys know what I mean by God-given talent. The Prophet ﷺ, one of the, and please Sheikh, let me know if I'm speaking out of line when I one of the unique qualities of his ability to build a community was we are an ummah of specialists, right? The Prophet ﷺ didn't want everyone to be like Khalid bin Walid, right? Khalid bin Walid was Khalid bin Walid. The Prophet ﷺ didn't want everyone to be like Hassan ibn Thabit, right? Hassan ibn Thabit, he had his talent. Khalid had his talent, and so let your child know, okay, fine, maybe he's not the best at math. Is he good at debate? Is he good at this? Is he good at that? Is she good at this? Is she good at that? Maybe she's good at sports. Maybe she's good at... Encourage that. Highlight that. And then once they build that confidence, see how that can be used as a vehicle for serving this deen. Okay, so I think every one of our children needs to know, subhanAllah, this is one thing special about me. Yeah, I keep a messy room. I don't listen to my parents here. I don't do this. But alhamdulillah, I have this talent. And now I have something to work with. Okay. So now let's talk about now that hopefully I've made sense as far as kind of rethinking our priorities, right? Let's talk about how to advise, work with, guide our children, right? So it seems like somebody's already talking about this tomorrow, about the teenage brain, right? Is there a difference between our brain and our child's brain? Any physicians out here? Neurologists? Doctors? Yes, no? So anatomically and chemically there is a difference. When the body starts going through puberty, there's a massive change in the brain that can sometimes last all the way up to 25, right? And a lot of times when your teenager does something crazy and you say, weren't you thinking? They actually weren't. Because that neural connection is not all there, right? So there are three main things going on, and I'm going to try not to make it too sciencey, but there's three basic things going on in the brain from puberty, sometimes, like I said, all the way up to 25. Sometimes it's 21, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, right? So the first process is known as myelination, and this is where neural connections are starting to speed up, and this is why, we start to say, subhanAllah, like in middle school, the child was like such and he's changed completely. I don't know what happened to my child. Well, his brain has actually changed. So if his brain is going to change, his personality is going to change, right? Our children are not going to remain the same. This is just one of the ways that Allah has created us. So the other way is known as pruning. So just as some neural connections are speeding up, other areas of the brain are actually shutting down, right? And then the third thing is called sprouting, where Allah allows our brains to actually anatomically change, where new connections are being made. So one, connections are speeding up. Two, some of the old connections are cutting off. And three, sprouting, more neural connections are being made. So do we have any control over the way that this is developed? The brain is developed 100%. Yeah. When we talk about nature versus nurture, has anybody heard this before? Nature versus nurture. Do you guys know what this means? Is it our genes that determine who we are as somebody, or is it our environment? Do you guys know the answer to that? Is it that Allah Azza wa Jalla has just created a person with this personality and that's it, he's going to be like this forever? Or is it, well, this person was given a good environment so he's going to change? Which one is it? Is it nature or nurture? Huh? Nurture? How many say nature? It's both. It's both. Environment, and this is actually subhanAllah very amazing. Environment can change the anatomy of the brain. And this is why, subhanAllah, children which go through trauma might not have other, deficits, can develop things like schizophrenia, right? Environment can make a huge difference. One of my good friends, and please do make dua for him. He has a very debilitating disease known as schizophrenia, and his is quite aggressive. It's completely genetic, but he's hafid of Quran. And he's in a nursing home right now. Please do make dua for him. We used to play basketball together, and slowly over time, he just started losing his sense of reality. Subhanallah, everything in his mind, like his sense of reality, is pretty much gone. But his Quran, I remember one time just sitting with him. I was like, Mahmoud, you and I are gonna. I heard your mom was telling me that you've memorized the Quran. Let's practice. So I'm just gonna pick some random verse, and you just finish the ayah. Didn't make a single mistake, right? So that part of his environment, no matter his biology, his genes told him that you're going to develop this disease. But his environment of Quran preserved that portion of the brain. Isn't that a miracle? SubhanAllah. So he's kept his hips. Alright. A changing brain means a changing identity, right? So what does when we talk about our kids don't listen and so on, what part of the brain is not working in? What do we need to fix, or what do we need to help kind of fix through that whole development, right? So there's an area of the brain right here called the prefrontal cortex, right? This has to do with logic. This has to do with thinking a few steps ahead, right? And it has connection with an area of our brain called the limbic system. The limbic brain is the one which deals with emotions. The amygdala is there, well, that's the part of the brain which fight or flight response. Somebody says something bad to me, my spouse says something mean to me, I want to yell back at her, I later regret it, So there's a connection. In adults, right, we have this connection. We're driving down the road, right, it's Texas. I'm from Chicago. Texas is the worst drivers. I don't know if you compare that to, I'm sorry, you're from Texas. All right. Dallas is better than Houston, is it? Okay, I don't know. Anyway, somebody cuts you off, right? The majority of us, we're not going to go and chase that person, right? We think, okay, for a split second, this guy cut me off, how dare he? And then what do you start to think about? Well, if I chase him, what if he has a gun? What if I get a speeding ticket? What if this? What if that? Right? Most of us will think around these lines. That part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is the one telling us, what if this? What if that? For a teenager, that doesn't activate. Somebody cut me off? Okay, I'm going to speed up and, I'm going to do this, right? And like I said, sometimes it doesn't happen until sometimes mid-20s. I think I was in my early 20s when I thought it would be a good idea to take a raft over a waterfall. Until I learned about what, alhamdulillah, I survived. But I didn't think about the consequences that, what goes up must come down. So how do we help develop that prefrontal cortex, right? There's a funny quote by Shakespeare, right? He said, in one of his sonnets, he said that but these boiled brains of 19 and 22-year-olds hunt, except in this weather. So what he's talking about is that adults at that time, they would, hunt, they would gather their meat, everything, when it's warm outside, and then just store it and think ahead. But the teenagers, they would just, okay, it's snowing outside, who cares? We'll just go without any clothes on and just, right? So Shakespeare even noticed that teenagers, they don't think ahead, right? So how do we develop that? We want to teach our children action and consequence, right? So I believe in being friendly towards your children, but not their friends. You guys know the difference, right? A friend is somebody which, okay, you do you, I'll do me, that's okay. No. You are, as the Sheikh mentioned, you are their shepherd, right? So you have to guide them. But as they start to get a little bit older, you can release the reins a little bit. What I mean by that is, you can talk to them, okay, you want to do this decision? Okay, what do you think are going to be outcomes of this? Let's sit down, let's plan it out. I remember going through multiple different plans. Like I said, Abu, I figured out my life. He's like, what, you're going to be a surgeon? No, I'm going to be a firefighter. right? And then okay, forget firefighting. I'm going to join the SWAT team. And I'm not making it up. This is actually my life plan, right? And then he's like, okay. But Abu didn't get, mad. He didn't say, okay, log kya kahenge. You guys know what that means? What are people going to think? My son's going to be on the SWAT team. He's going to be a firefighter. He said, okay, Usman, sit down, write a plan. How many credits do you need? And we walk through it. And then so that I learned, okay, this is why this is not feasible. This is why this is not feasible. And through that process, I'm learning, okay, action, consequence. And I'm learning how to plan. And so this is how we teach our kids to develop this prefrontal cortex, right? How many of you have teenagers that are driving age, right? Okay. So you teach them not to speed, right? What are the consequences if they speed? Ticket. Who pays for it? We do, right? Insurance companies bank on this fact that teenagers don't think. That's why isn't it a higher rate for inexperienced drivers? They know this. They study the brain. They know that the prefrontal cortex is not, working at optimal levels. So yeah, we're going to bank on higher the insurance rate. So, maybe talking to the kid about, listen, okay, if you get your speeding ticket, keys are taken away, driver's license taken away, you get a part-time job until you pay off that ticket. They will, throw a tantrum, they'll yell at you, this, that. You don't have to be mean about it, but you take those keys away. What that teaches them is that the next time I'm speeding, they're going to have to do that calculation in their mind, right? Okay, so last time I sped, I wasn't able to meet my friends for 4 or 5 months. I had no car. Do I really want to speed? You know what I'm saying? Right? So you're teaching them that, okay, now I have to think a few steps ahead, right? All right. Now let's talk about, so as far as the prefrontal cortex, right, just let's be mindful of 2 things. Number 1, teach them the decision-making skills. And number 2, be mindful of what children are exposed to, right? I think there's going to be a few talks about addiction. I was supposed to give the talk on addiction, but I'm traveling, so. One of the very unique things that we noticed about addiction, right? So if somebody starts smoking cannabis, if somebody starts with heroin or some of these harder drugs or alcohol, if they started at 15, let's say, or 14, something really interesting happens. It's like their maturity gets stunted. It's like frozen in time at 14. So I've had patients who are in their 30s, but they thought like 16-year-olds. Because the moment you start using, right, that brain development kind of stops. That ability to think ahead, so on and so. Their environment during that time matters a lot. Their exposure to yelling, their exposure to fighting, all of these things, right, kids don't forget, and especially because their brain is developing. And we're talking about the 3 different ways, anatomically that the brain is changing. Their environment affects the growth, right? So we have to be extra mindful of what type of environments we are exposing our children to. Okay. Now, as far as like how we motivate our children, right? So the first thing I said again, the base needs to be out of love. I remember I had a patient a while ago, completely apathetic. Just he was off his medications. He was smoking a lot of cannabis. Sometimes at points even physically abusive towards his parents. Right? Just really out of control. And, he came into my office, and he was in what we call in therapy a pre-contemplative stage of change. What that means is that he really, listen, dude, I'm here because my parents bugged me and forced me to come here. They'll take away my keys if I don't, so that's why I'm here, And so I'm letting him talk, and he's just like, yeah, this is all nonsense, therapy's garbage, I'm going to keep smoking, I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to keep doing that, right? And we spoke about different relationships. He spoke about how he has a very, strange relationship with his father. He said, but my mom, I love my mom, right? And out of all of the things, I was trying to grab onto something. What's going to motivate this kid, right? I said, I heard you speak for like an hour, and what's interesting? You have a superpower right now. He's like, yeah, what's that? And I said, you have the ability with your actions to mend your mother's heart or break it. I wonder what you're going to do. I left it at that. And he thought about that. And the whole time this kid was just joking around, okay, this is all nonsense. And I saw him get serious for a second. Because something like was pulled in him. Wait, that's my mom. That's the one which doesn't yell at me. That's the one which hugs me. Did I listen to her? No, I didn't listen to my father. But I would, throw myself in front of a bus for my father now. Right? Because of that base of love that he built, right? Our father used to sit with us and teach us seerah, but we barely paid attention. But eventually it clicked that what my father is teaching in seerah, he's living it. He never raises his voice, right? I can't remember a single time my father lost his cool with us. And that motivation, like, it really made a 180 in my life. So, this kid was kind of shocked. He's like, yeah, you're right. So then I just said, okay, it's on you, dude. What do you want to do with it? You want to break your mom's heart? You have that power. Go for it. I'm not breaking her heart. You are. You want to fix it? You have that power. And I left it at that. So, now he's going to have to make that choice. Do I want to go into the contemplative stage, right? So let's build that as a structure. Now let's talk about actually setting goals, right? So out of the different ways to motivate children, right? What research shows the best way to motivate children is what's known as goal setting. We want to make the final, their objective, the goal and not the end. What I mean by that is this. Let's suppose that a child failed their math test and you want them to improve. The goal you help them work towards is, your goal is to, let's say, study for 15 minutes a day. Okay? It's not to get 100%. It's not to get a passing grade. It's to study 15 minutes a day. That's it. And so now they start to see an association with, okay, that's all I have to do. It's not, I don't have the pressure to pass or fail. My only thing is to set these specific goals. And so as they start to do that, what we're essentially teaching them is tying their camel. You all know this hadith, right? When it comes to effort, what we're teaching our kids is tie your camel and put your trust in Allah, but tying your camel takes certain steps. So let that be the goal and not the end, right? Child will learn to eventually start to see the connection between effort and consequences, right? There is we're talking about Gen Z, like, they are, what we say is they're the most informed generation, but there's no kids listening here, right? Yeah, but they're also the most spoiled. They're also the most entitled. And this is research saying it, not me. There's something known as academic entitlement. Has anybody ever heard of that? Academic entitlement. So this is something a lot of college professors now are seeing with this generation. Academic entitlement is kind of like what it sounds like. It's basically the idea that I expect to get a good grade without putting in the effort, right? How many of us have, like, kids, teenagers, maybe sometimes, which kind of have this mindset? I expect XYZ results just because, okay? If we have our kids just focus on the end goal, I expect you to get an A, right? They don't know the steps to get there. Does that make sense, right? We're teaching them, inshallah, how to tie that camel. So academic entitlement is defined as the tendency to possess an expectation of academic success without taking the required personal responsibility for achieving the result, right? I think that a lot of times we as parents are scared to let go of certain things for our kids, right? And we do it when we talk about this generation being kind of entitled and so on. One of the things that we're to blame for is we coddle our kids, right? I'm a therapist myself. I don't read as many books about parenting as, like, some of the parents would come to me like, oh, have you read this book? And I'm worried about this. I'm like, no, dude, I didn't read all that, right? So I think that we sometimes need to allow our kids to have some of those experiences that we had, right? Our parents let us learn certain things, get part-time jobs, I think that sometimes this idea of log kya kahenge, what people are going to think, when that dictates our parenting, we really mess up. So going back to this idea of allowing our kids to, make mistakes, but kind of in a controlled environment. Okay, so you want to do this. Let's write down the plans. Let's write down the steps so that they learn how to make decisions, right? Again, full circle, the point of the prefrontal cortex is that decision making. The way we help our children develop that is by having them plan out certain things. Okay, but so let's just bring it back full circle to my beginning point, and if you can just take that point home, inshallah, that's more than enough, right? Terry Crews, he's a football player, but he's a phenomenal father and, like, a great speaker. He had said, parents worry too much. At the end of the day, love your kids unconditionally. Don't embarrass them in public. You'll be okay, right? Nothing is more important than preserving the relationship. Not them being in med school, not them getting a perfect SAT. That stuff will come. It will. right? Don't ruin your relationship with your child because of that. This doesn't mean don't have rules. Be friendly with them, but don't, you don't have to be a friend, but never stop being their parent. So again, 4 tips that I'd like you guys to take home, right? Number 1, have that, it doesn't have to be dinner, it could be breakfast, something. Just one time, this is one of the things which our generation unfortunately has lost, right? When we were younger, TV was like, cartoons were only on for a certain amount of time. You were forced at one point, there's nothing on TV, there's nothing else to do. You sit down, you eat with your family. And most of us, it looks like, are from, maybe the subcontinent and other parts of the world where we had the benefit of having extended family, right? It wasn't just us raising the kids, right? It was nana, nani, dada, dadi, right? Aunts, uncles, and so on. So our kids, unfortunately, have lost that. So that's why preserving just that time, if it's half an hour of dinner time, where again, the goal is not, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you complete your homework? Your room's still a mess? No, you can yell at them afterwards. But that half an hour, get to know your child. Learn something unique about them, right? I can't tell you how many times teenagers have come to me and said, my parents don't know me. They don't understand me. Yeah, I'm sure they love me, but they have no idea who I am. Why not? When's the last time you asked your child about, their interests, their friends? Are you getting along with your friends? When was the last time your daughter had a fight with her best friend? What about these things, right? Before we talk about their dress or their, academic success. The second thing is detox from technology as a family. Get a little box, half an hour every day. Everybody, mom, dad, everyone throws their phone in, half an hour to an hour. Lead by example. The third thing is generational gap is a social construct. Play with your kids. Learn about some of it, even if you think it's silly, right? Sit down, play video games with them. Right? I'm not encouraging too much screen time, but if they're playing, go sit down with them and play whatever silly video game it is. And then fourth is learn your child's God-given talent, encourage it, and then once you have that, so for example, okay, this person is good at expressing themselves, they're good at writing, they're good at this, they're good at that. Now let's sit down and say, oh wow, Allah has given you this talent. What are the steps we can do to make this grow? That gives them confidence, that gives them a platform, and that makes them feel loved and cared for, and most of all understood. I'll close with this last thing. One of the teenagers had said that the most powerful thing that my parents could tell me is me too. What that means is that I've made mistakes and so on, and as parents we show that we're perfect, we never made mistakes. In the moment we're able to say, I went through that too. I made that mistake as well. SubhanAllah, okay, I'm not alone in this. Right? My dad or my mom is showing some level of vulnerability. So have this communication, have this understanding, have this love, have this connection with your child. And I promise you, if you build those, that's the difficult thing. Everything else, academic success, tahfiz, even religion, it'll come full circle. It'll come full circle, right? Allah Azza wa Jalla is the one which guides, right? And we want to teach our kids after every success, we thank Allah Azza wa Jalla, and we ourselves have to show that by leading by example, that we put our trust continuously in Allah Azza wa Jalla, right? I guess there's going to be more talks about spirituality and so on, right? But just this idea of leading by example, showing our parents that, showing our children that no matter what, we never lose that connection with Allah. I promise you they're not going to be abandoned. I'll just close with this last very small story. I have a patient who, wonderful guy, wonderful human being. He's computer programmer, really educated. Cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, just a plethora of different things. He came to see me one time after being arrested. Comes out of jail. He prays 5 times a day. I was shocked. I was like, how? He's like, well, I just wait to sober up. I wait for the drugs to leave my system and I pray again. And, beyond all the medication that I was asking him to consider and the therapy and all of this, I looked at him and I said, man, I don't know how, but you've held onto the rope of Allah. You're going to be saved. Something's going to happen. I just don't know how. But you make dua for me too. And he was in tears, right? Because he's like, I'm a drug addict and I just got out of jail and you're talking to me this way. I was like, yeah, because you've held onto that rope of Allah. I don't know how, I don't know when, but somehow, some way, Allah is not going to abandon you. So let's teach our children that level of connection and tawakkul and trust in Allah. All right, Jazakumullah khair. We'll just open the floor for a few questions and then we'll go.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Usman. I've already received a couple of questions, so I'm going to just start going through them. For those who joined us late, if you would like to ask a question by text, you can send your question to this phone number. The phone number is 972-379-7624. Once again, the phone number is 972-379-7624. Let me just read a couple of questions, and then we can also take questions from the floor if you would like to ask that way. So the first question here that I have is, and I'll let you answer it, Brother Usman. It says, Assalamu alaikum. Walaikum salam. When I tell my teenage daughter repeatedly not to do certain things, she occasionally says, if you tell me one more time, I'll actually do it. Is that being rebellious? I worry about this trend. How do you address this?
I'm kind of confused that that's a threat for her to follow your instructions. That's me. Is it being rebellious? So if I do one more, I'll actually do it. I'm trying to kind of gauge, is this, do you understand the question? I'm trying to gauge if this is the child just testing the parent. So let me answer it this way, right? So if there is, is this being rebellious? If it's said in a disrespectful manner, right? More than our children following what we say, like I think the priority needs to be given to adab, right? That's what's going to get them to be successful in this life and the hereafter, right? How do we get that behavior to change? Set the example of adab, right? Don't yell at them and raise your voice and curse and tell them you have to have respect and adab. Because what example are you setting while you're doing that? You're telling them the exact opposite, right? You can be strict, you can be stern, right? Like, listen, I don't appreciate being spoken this way, and until you speak to me another way, this conversation's over. And that's it. You can say that in a cool, calm, collected way, and that's it, right? It doesn't have to be you meet her harshness with harshness, right? So that's one thing. Again, going back to my father, I know I give a lot of examples of my father, but he's a great role model. A long time ago, I'm going to lose all my credibility because I'm just talking about all the bad stuff I did when I was young. My brother and I were accused of doing something we didn't do, vandalizing some property. It was at the local swimming pool. So I remember we went to the swimming pool with our father because we didn't want to lose our swimming privileges for the summer. And we were like, Abu, I swear we didn't do anything. This lady's a liar. She's accusing her. And we didn't, actually. It was crazy. I don't know why she accused us. And so we go there, and I remember we're arguing with the lady. And my father told us before, he said, I'm going to have your side. I'm going to have your back as long as you act like a Muslim. As long as you keep your adab. The moment you lose your adab, I'm done. And Abu was very calm and collected, right? And so we go in there, we're speaking to this lady, and she just starts throwing all these accusations at us. Your children are horrible, they did this, they did that. And my brother stands up and he says, this is, and he says the swear word. And Abu just very calmly, he says, okay, beta, time to get up, we're going. No argument, nothing. He gets up and he leaves. My brother and I are furious, right? What do you think the message was? The message was that no matter what, Abu kept his patience, right? If we want to be heard, if we want to be understood, right? We have to first start with adab. Abu explained that to us how? Not by yelling at us, right? By calmly, like the more we yelled, the more calm he got. And then he just walked away. That was it. So that was a lesson for us, like at the end, that listen, if we want to be respected by our elders, we got to give them respect. Yeah.
All right, next question. This is actually related to something you said in your talk. It says, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam. If you take away the keys to teach them a lesson, how will they go to college? Would that not increase your own responsibilities?
Oh, I was talking about high schoolers. They can take a bus, but college. Okay, well, I mean, that was just an example, right? That was just an example. Where are they getting the money to, pay for certain things? Who's paying the insurance? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? Right? Your insurance goes up. The point is don't worry about having them have a part-time job. I think parents get anxious about this. They're like, no, but I want them to have perfect SATs and this and that. Listen, I worked throughout school, right? That only made me work harder. That only made me manage my time better, right? So yeah, in that particular situation, don't take away their keys, right? But, have them pay for the insurance. Have them pay the difference. There has to, and if that means that they have to make that choice between eating out with friends and, making that payment in order to keep their car, so be it, right? But you're giving that lesson that, hey, if I do certain actions, and again, it doesn't have to be something which is this huge theatrical performance where you're yelling and this and that. Okay, no problem. For Bethany, this is, the insurance is raised this much, right? You'll just have to make up the difference. That's it. Don't get mad, right? Let them figure that out. So at least in their mind, and they have this, especially at college age, right? That's really towards the end stages of when that prefrontal cortex is developing. So that's very crucial that they learn this idea of action and consequences at that age.
Okay, next question. Before I read the question, again, for those of you who didn't jot down the phone number, if you want to ask a question, you can send a text message to this number. The number is 972-379-7624. Once again, 972-379-7624. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. How do we differentiate between mental illness versus jinn possession?
That's an awesome question. That's an excellent question. Actually, one of my colleagues, Dr. Fahad Khan, out of the Khalil Center, he did an excellent talk on this. So I think it's online. That is a very excellent question. I'll let you chime in as well because I'm sure you know. You can talk about the ruqya part. I don't know if you have any scary jinn stories there. Right. So that's a good question. So there's a few delineating features, right? If there's any mental health illness which mimics sihr or jinn possession, and obviously that's sihr jinn possession is not my area, right? If I start doing ruqya in the office, I'm going to lose my license. So it's something known as schizophrenia, right? So with sihr, and you got to tell me something about this. I'm sure you know. With sihr, and correct me if I'm wrong, and jinn possession is one. There are certain behavior changes, correct? There are hallucinations at times. Sometimes there can be hallucinations. Sometimes there can be. Now the difference is with schizophrenia. The hallucinations are very accusatory, right? With sihr, I think your adab changes, correct? Right? You might leave prayer, you might, go towards more, haram and filth and these type of things. With schizophrenia, it's a specific type of paranoia, right? So it's an example of hallucination for schizophrenia, right? Like I had a patient a while ago, he had schizophrenia. And what he said was that people are watching me. And then it went more towards people are watching me, and I think at night somebody actually came in, and this is an extreme example. He was off his meds, and somebody actually implanted a microchip in my teeth, somewhere deep inside. So he actually took his wife, made them drive all the way to a dentist. Went to the dentist, said, "Listen, doc, there is a microchip planted in my tooth. You got to pull it out." That's schizophrenia. Right. One of my good friends, the one I was telling you about, the way he actually ended up in the hospital, because we used to play basketball together. One day he was driving, and as he's driving, he thinks, "Oh man, I knew something was wrong with me. My kneecaps are broken." He's driving. So he walks into the ER. He says, "Excuse me, I need some help. My kneecaps are broken." Right? So you typically won't get this type of delusion with sihr, but this is what you'll get with schizophrenia, right? And then, he messaged me a few months later when he was in the hospital, and he said, "Usman, I got to tell you something." And I'm like, "Hey, I haven't spoken to you for a while." He's like, "Listen, I have a secret." I was like, "What's your secret?" He said, "You are actually Khidr, and I am Musa." And that's when I knew, I'm like, okay, something is really wrong. And so I was like, "Where are you?" He told me it was, a mental health facility at that time. So I drove there, and I found out this is what's going on. I remember when I was there with him, I stayed with him the whole day. We prayed Zuhr together standing up, and it was Asr time, and I said, "Mahmoud, let's pray Asr." And he said, "Usman, I can't pray Asr with you standing up." I was like, "Why not?" "Didn't you forget? My kneecaps are broken." I didn't argue with him. I said, "Okay, no problem. You lay down and you pray." So that's schizophrenia. May Allah preserve, subhanAllah, the idea of having a peaceful mind, a sane mind, subhanAllah, it's a blessing. Once you get into this field, you really start to realize Allah Azza wa Jal has really preserved and protected our sanity, because it's a very scary life. And, again, I'm not giving a fatwa on this, but I'm assuming that for extreme cases, the pen is lifted for these people, inshallah. Okay, all right. That's the difference.
Okay, there's a few more questions here. So this one says, sometimes husband and wife may not be on the same page on certain issues. How do we steer our kids in those situations? Sorry for being vague.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great question, right? So there's two differences, right? One is a difference in morality, a difference in actual big-term goals, right? Like one parent wants a child to pray, the other parent wants him to go to the club, right? Okay, so that's an issue. That's a values issue. That's very difficult. I don't know what the compromise is between pray 5 times a day and going to the club, right? Most of the time what I see is, in general, they have similar values, but they argue about the approach. Right? So one parent will say they have to pray 5 times a day, and you have to stand there with them and force them to pray. And the other parent will say, no, I want them to pray 5 times a day, but don't be so strict with them, right? Both have the same goal, but they have completely different approaches, right? So in that simple answer, come to marriage therapy. More bigger answer is find a way to accept your partner's way, and kind of like, it's not going to be exactly your style, as long as you guys have the same end objective, right? And then see where there's middle ground. So you know what? Okay, Sheikh, this is the way that you want to try and do things. Okay, we'll try this way as well. Let's see if there's a middle ground, right? Respect the fact that we both have the same goals. At the end of the day, they're our children. We both love them equally, right? Just because their method is different doesn't mean that the end goal or their intention is different, if that makes sense, right? But then if the objectives are completely different, then that's another issue. So
this one says, what should I do if I catch my daughter texting a boy?
No screen time. Okay. If you catch, so it's interesting. Like the reason I started off with the whole make your base a base of like understanding, communication, love, and so on is that sometimes parents will come to me and say, "Oh my God, my child has a boyfriend, my child has a girlfriend," right? And I'll ask like, "How do you know?" And if the answer is, "Well, they told me," I shake their hand. I'm like, "That's awesome. That's great," because they have that level of love and understanding and communication, right? And then you can start to talk to them about boundaries and so on, right? Why does the child feel the need to hide that? Right? That's the bigger question. Are they scared of hurting you? Do they feel mom has anxiety? And so, because I've seen this a lot with kids that, I don't want to share my pain, I don't want to share my worries, I don't want to share this and this. Sometimes even if it's extreme, something bad happened to me in school, but I don't want to share because I already see mom worried all the time. I already see dad worried all the time. I don't want to increase their anxiety. I have to tell them, listen, your parents are a lot stronger than you think. It's your parents' job to worry about you, not the other way around. Right? But our kids put a lot of pressure on themselves. So the biggest question you have to ask is, why were they hiding that? Right? Ask that question first. What made you either be afraid or hesitant to share with me? Were you scared of my reaction? Am I unapproachable? What's going on with that? Because chances are if they're hiding that, they might be hiding a lot of other things, right? So let's first figure out how can we open that trust, that communication, and then move from there, inshallah.
Okay, this one says, is there a maturity of brain condition for my kids whose parents have taught them about cleanliness and tidiness, yet the kids/adults/college kids choose to unlearn everything they've been taught? Example, kids don't brush their teeth even though they've been taught since they grew teeth that they should brush.
Okay. These are college students not brushing their teeth? Like, okay, all right. All they'll take is a girl commenting on it, and then they'll be brushing their teeth all day. Subhanallah. Some of these habits, right? They have to be step by step, and Subhanallah, that's a tough one. I don't think I've heard of like a college student not brushing their teeth. You want to answer one? You answer one.
I think the more general question is that, are these kinds of things part of what you said earlier about, maturity of the brain condition, brain development?
Oh no, that doesn't have to do with the prefrontal cortex. That's just like maybe not being able to organize, not being responsible, and so on, right? That's more a lack of organization. When we talk about the prefrontal cortex, mainly we're talking about risky behavior, not planning ahead, things like that. So
is this a type of rebellion then that, things that they were taught early on by their parents, they just don't want to do them anymore? They want to try different things. They want to be free from
I mean, possibly, but again, if this is a boy in college, I don't see how him not showering for a few days and brushing his teeth is going to get back at the parents. I mean, if anything, it'll be, something his own. But that being said, on a serious note, sometimes, and again, let's not take this as a general statement, sometimes lack of motivation for hygiene could be symptoms of depression, right? In major depressive disorder, sometimes I actually have to, keep up with my patients as far as, hey, did you shower today? Did you do this? Did you do that? And that's not because of, they want to be dirty. It's because the depression is so heavy that even the motivation to get up and comb one's hair, brush one's teeth, it's lacking. So in some cases, that could be an indication of major depression. But I don't think it's really a rebellion. I think that's, Allahu Alam. Yeah.
Okay, this one says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What can a parent do when children speak in a disrespectful manner? If the parent tries to address the matter when emotions are not running high, the child believes they didn't say or do something wrong. What can the parents do in that circumstance?
So hold on, let me read it. I think I have one more after this. So the parent tries to address the matter when emotions are not running high. The child believes they did or didn't. I mean, if what's said by that, if what's meant by that is that when emotions are high, meaning that I'm yelling, then the child takes me more seriously. That's probably the child taking you seriously out of fear or to get you just to be quiet. It's not really that they're processing it, right? More than that, again, going back to this idea of developing that love and going back and saying, listen, what you did was wrong, that really hurt. I'm going to refuse to engage in conversation until you fix your adab. How long are they going to ignore you for? How long are they going to, 1 day, 2 days, and you still, communicate with them with adab and so on, but you tell them, listen, what you did was hurtful. That's it. Hey, how are they going to argue with that? No, I didn't hurt you. Well, no, those are my feelings. This was, मुझे ये बुरा लगा, that's it. मुझे तकलीफ हुई. I'm just really hurting that you did that, and I'm hoping better for you. Plus, that's it, right? Okay, one more question.
Okay, so there's a few. I'm just trying to choose from these. There was one really good one here. Okay, so I guess I'll just go with this one. It says, Assalamu alaikum. You talked about the absence of the village for us raising kids today. Can you touch on what it means to be a good father in this modern context? Because oftentimes it's the mothers that take on the extra load that results from being the village.
No, that's a great question. Fathers are just as equally responsible to show that love, to show that affection. So just on the side of a village, yes, one of the disadvantages we have is that we don't have that extended family, that support. Some of the research which shows about what helps this generation, and this is something that maybe I would advise this masjid to do, right? There's a plethora of research out there showing that for teenagers especially, big brother, big sister programs, that mentorship is even more effective than therapy at times, right? So yes, we don't have that huge family village, right? But and you and I have both been overseas, right? I think the masajids here are much more active and so on as a response to the lack of extended family. So let's use those masajids to be that family, right? To develop those types of programs, right? So that's the first part. As far as the role of the father, I mean the role of father is just as important as the mother, right? I think that it's something that we've made it uncomfortable as fathers to tell our children that we love them, to hug them, to the Prophet ﷺ reprimanded, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody for not hugging, for not kissing their children, right? The one who does not show mercy will not be shown mercy, right? And some of the scholars, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, say this has a few meanings. One is that they will not be shown mercy by Ar-Rahman because they do not show mercy, right? We know, Ar-Rahmun yarhamuhum Ar-Rahman, irhamu man fil ard, yarhamkum man fis sama. That those who show mercy will are shown mercy, show mercy to the inhabitants of earth, and the inhabitants of heaven will show mercy to you. But this can also be understood as what is it? Man la yarham, man la yarham. Man la yarham la yarham, right? I was going to kill me for getting that wrong. Okay. Can also mean that, you don't show that love to your child when they grow older and we're weak and feeble, right? They're not going to show that love because they never learn it. Hug your children, love them. Ustad Usman, he was telling a story about after he converted, he learned about the adab of the Prophet ﷺ and how the Prophet ﷺ would openly express his love, right? And he would grab Hassan and Hussein radiallahu anhuma and kiss them and tell them, how beautiful they are, how exalted they are in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla. He openly did that. And so he said, I decided, that my elderly father, who was just really rough and tough, was going to call him up and say, Dad, I love you. And he said it was so awkward, right? He's talking to him on the phone, and right before he's about to hang up, by the way, Dad, I love you. And the dad's like, what? What did you just say? Right? And he said, it was just so weird for me to say this, but I just, Bismillah, and I said it. I said, Dad, I love you. And he said, then the next time, called again, I said again, Dad, I love you. He says, to this day now, my father, who would never say I love you, right, won't let me hang up the phone until I say I love you, Dad. He changed that culture, right? So it shouldn't just be the mothers which are showing that affection and love. The fathers should as well, especially with daughters, by the way, right? I get a lot of, I do a lot of premarital counseling. Our daughters make really, really poor decisions when it comes to choices in guys and so on because of their low self-esteem, because they've never been told they're beautiful. They've never been told by their parents that, they're special and this and that. So the first idiot guy which goes up to them and says, hey, nice job, they fall in love with, right? Don't let that idiot be the first person which tells your daughter that she's beautiful. You tell her, right? So we have to really, as a community, work on fulfilling the prophetic sunnah of expressing that love physically, emotionally, verbally, even if it's uncomfortable. It'll get comfortable after a while. Let's really change that culture, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Usman. He has to go. He has an early flight in the morning, so I'm sorry that I couldn't get to all the questions. However, yes, he's going to give you your email address. You can write it down and email your questions to him, inshallah. We do have an all-day conference tomorrow, and some of the questions that I did not choose to ask, I didn't choose them because they will be addressed in some of the talks tomorrow. So make sure you come tomorrow and benefit from the program tomorrow. The email address that he wants to share with you is usman@peacefulu.org. That's USMAN at peacefulu, one word, peaceful, YOU.org. Jazakallah khairan, Brother Usman. Thank you all for coming. We end by saying Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa sallillahumma wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the organizers of this event. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them in their family, in their health, in their wealth, in their dunya and in their akhirah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this a beneficial event for all of us and our children, our families. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless this community with programs like this and better. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.